Oh, hello there, and thanks for joining Uncomplicated Math today. Today we're going to be looking at how to subtract decimals, and by the end of this video you'll know the steps involved when subtracting decimals. So let's get started. So in question number 1, we're being asked to subtract the decimal 6 and 12 hundredths from 9 and 7 tenths. So looking over to our steps involved here on our right hand side, we can see that our first step is to line up our decimals vertically. So we're going to rewrite this problem vertically so that we can actually work through this problem. And when we do this, we're going to make sure that our decimals are aligning vertically. So before I write my second decimal, I'm going to write my decimal place right down below to make sure that all my place values are aligning properly. So my ones are in my ones place and my tenths are in my tenths place. And now I'm sure you've noticed that this equation isn't quite even. We're missing something in the hundredths place beside the 7 here. So that's where step number 2 comes in, where we're going to fill in with placeholder zeros. So we're going to write a 0 here in our hundredths place because adding a 0 to the right of a decimal does not change the value of that decimal. So now we can actually work through this problem. So now we can move on to step number 3, which is to bring down the decimal into our answer, because the location of our decimal is not going to change in our answer. So now we can see all 3 of our decimals here are properly aligned. So we can move on to step number 4, which is to subtract the decimals from right to left. And we can see that we can't subtract 2 from 0, so we're going to borrow from next door. So we're going to put a line through the 7, which is now a 6, and we're going to put a 1 up top, which represents a 10. So when we subtract 2 from 10, we're left with 8. And when we subtract 1 from 6, we're left with 5. And when we subtract 6 from 9, we're left with 3 for 3 and 58 hundredths. So when we subtract 6 and 12 hundredths from 9 and 7 tenths, we're left with 3 and 58 hundredths. So now we're going to move on to question number 2, where this time we're being asked to subtract 11 and 1 tenths from 36 and 235 thousandths. So remembering our first step is to line up our decimals vertically. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to write our first decimal of 36 and 235 thousandths. So to make sure that our numbers are aligning here, we're going to write our decimal right down below, and then we're going to fill in the digits for our next decimal. So we have 11 and 1 tenth. So now we can move on to step number 2, which is to fill in with placeholder zeros, because we can see here that we're missing a few zeros in both the hundredths and the thousandths place. So now we can move on to step number 3, now that we've put in all our placeholder zeros, and we're going to bring our decimal straight down into our answer. So now we can move on to step number 4, which is to subtract the decimals from right to left. When we take away 0 from 5, we're left with 5. When we take away 0 from 3, we're left with 3. When we take away 1 from 2, we're left with 1. When we take away 1 from 6, we're left with 5. And lastly, when we take away 1 from 3, we're left with 2 for 25 and 135 thousandths. So when we subtract 11 and 1 tenths from 36 and 235 thousandths, we're left with 25 and 135 thousandths. So hopefully by now you understand the steps involved when subtracting decimals. Help make math less complicated by smashing those like and subscribe buttons. As always, enjoy today's math journey.